Greetings and welcome back, everyone, to The Angry Chicken, a podcast about Hearthstone, Heroes of Warcraft. I am Garrett Weinzierl, and I'm joined, as always, by Mr. Willie Dills Gregory. And Ms. Jocelyn Moffat's missing this week, but we found a replacement. I think you guys will be okay. Everything's fine. She's fine. Christmas has just whisked her away. Dills, how you doing this week?
I'm doing excellent, actually. I was playing Hearthstone until the wee hours of the morning last night, and loving it. I'm playing random mage, RNG mage, and paladin. One of those decks is good, and the other is just fun.
Oh, I feel like the one that has random in front of the title is probably...
Is terrible. It's basically just, I just designed it like this is the deck Garrett would hate. Everything random.
All right, fair enough. Also joining us today, if you're watching the video feed, this has already been spoiled for you, but for all of our audio-only listeners, Mr. Brian Kibler from BMK Gaming. Brian, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. We've been excited to have you on, and apparently, according to Twitter, so is a lot of other folks. So,
well, glad to hear it.
Yeah, we one thing I will have to tell you, we do get in trouble sometimes. Not really trouble, but people email us because they say we talk about Magic too much on our Hearthstone show. So this might be a problem for those people today, because if anybody doesn't know, Brian's a professional Magic player. So prepare yourselves, people who hate it when we talk about Magic. It might come. Sorry. Sorry, I'm not sorry.
Relevant analogies may rear their beautiful educational heads. So
yeah, I don't understand the problem with it. It's like, you got to compare it to the things that already exist, right? And if there's anything to compare it to, why not the most successful game in this genre? So
the first one too.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know what to tell you there, Dills, but I'm okay with it. So, but yeah, Brian, if folks are unfamiliar with you, if I can just run down the list of why you were awesome. First thing that they
do go on. Yeah.
As far as Hearthstone is concerned, I think they should immediately go to bmkgaming.com, where you have frequent Hearthstone articles always posted over there. We talk about them on this show multiple times, and I'm sure we'll be talking about a couple today, especially since you so generously wrote a long article about Fellreaver, and there's no way we're not talking to you about that today. And then, but you were also the lead designer on the original WoW TCG game, correct?
That's correct. I was one of the initial engine designers, as well as the head developer for the game for its first few years.
Okay, gotcha. Well, that's super interesting. I barely had a chance to touch that game because it came out. I remember it coming out right when I was in the deep. I was just buried by college at the time, and I was like, oh, I want to play this, and I managed to squeeze in a few games here and there, but it was really hard for me to sink into it.
I'll be honest, I was only ever trying to get a Spectral Tiger mount that game. That was pretty much it.
I think, either the first or second one in existence. I actually had one on my character before it was available through the packs and everything, so it definitely impressed a lot of people back then.
So you also play WoW then?
I did. I played
currently
more WoW than I would like to admit.
Okay, all right.
I was actually in one of the sort of top U.S. raid guilds for a number of years before I eventually decided I needed to reclaim the rest of my life.
Yeah,
the game has that.
Actually, WoW is for me, like you and a lot of people probably came to this game because they like card games. I actually came to this game because I like WoW. World of Warcraft was the game that got me into Hearthstone, and then Hearthstone got me into Magic and other things like that. So maybe reverse path to the same type of thing. But that's interesting. I didn't know that you played, so cool.
And I played both, so I was interested all around. So, and yeah, as Dill said, you're also obviously a big figure in the Magic community. You're a two-time Magic the Gathering Pro Tour champion. You're also in the Magic Pro Tour Hall of Fame. So you're all up in the card games.
Yeah, I basically haven't done anything in my adult life that hasn't been either making or playing card games for a living. So, and I'm 44, so my adult life has actually been a while. So
yeah, all right.
That is, like Dill said, that's you're experiencing a dream a lot of folks I think out there probably have, which is just awesome. So
I certainly can't complain. It's pretty sweet.
So I guess to kick things off, I mean, it's been a few weeks now. We've been able to sit down and enjoy Goblins versus Gnomes. outside of just trying it out, we were lucky enough to have a chance to play it at BlizzCon, but that was about it. Now it's nice to actually sit here with the set and really tinker with it. How has your experience with Goblins vs. Gnomes overall been? Because obviously you've gotten to even play it in a competitive aspect at the high level.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of fun with it. I think there's a lot of really cool new cards. I mean, the coolest time in any collectible game is when there's just new stuff. What's kept me interested in collectible games, whether Magic or Hearthstone, for so long, is just that there's always new challenges, always new stuff to figure out, and that's really just the coolest part of the entire experience to me. I love building decks and trying to sort of adapt them to shifts in the metagame and things like that, and that's really been the coolest part of Goblins vs. Gnomes to me, is just that structural shift.
Okay.
I actually think that now with this many cards, there's just so much more interesting things. Like I remember when Zoo kind of first became Zoo as we now kind of see it. At the time, I looked at it and I thought, well, I've been kind of playing this deck already. This is just, but I called it Board Control Paladin at the time, and it was basically like, or Board Control Warlock. Sorry, just flood the board, right? Mm-hmm. And then trade a lot, and that's what I played. Like in the tournament that I played, where I played against Chalky in the finals. That's the deck I was playing. And then it became Zoo, but it was like, well, with only 300-something cards, eventually we're going to land on this kind of similar set of 30 here. But now with 400 to 500 or whatever the total number is now, you're looking at a lot more interesting possibilities. So.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's just more cards. Just means a lot more new stuff. By the way, as an aside, I find it hilarious that people might complain about people talk about Magic on the show and yet call a deck Zoo, because that name is totally from Magic.
It's a Magic.
It was actually a deck with like gorillas and lions and cats and dogs. Yeah. That's the reason it's called Zoo. It's a deck with a similar sort of strategy of just play a bunch of small minions. But anyway.
Or like Miracle, right? Miracle's
Miracle. Yeah, that came from the Miracle Grow deck in Magic. Was the origin of that as a term, because it originally used questing, adventure, and Edwin Van Cleef, like these growing minions, which was analogous to the Quirion Dryad in the Magic deck. So
yeah, no, a lot of the terminology has been borrowed, and that's part of the thing. I've been so excited by the release of Goblins vs. Gnomes, because this is something I haven't had a chance to experience with, say, Magic the Gathering. Now, I played Magic for the past, I think, maybe only 3 years. I'm relatively new to Magic. Granted, I was playing it before Hearthstone, but not by much. And at no point have I played Magic where there was only 300 some odd cards, and then the first influx of an expansion happened. That just I've never experienced that with any card game ever, and it's very interesting because it's wildly different from say Magic the Gathering, which is when I got in. I mean, I think
there was way too many cards. Right.
Well, exactly. There was always plenty of cards, always plenty of diversity, and whereas right before Goblins vs. Gnomes came out, Hearthstone seemed to have I wouldn't say, well, for lack of a better word, felt like it had gotten a little stale. Well, figured out, I think, is a better way to put it.
It leveled off. There wasn't that much, new. There weren't new decks constantly coming out anymore at a certain point. So, I mean, I saw Miracle Druid in some random tournaments towards the end, which was kind of strange. But I think people were just messing.
And we got the Malagos version of Miracle, which really kind of blew our minds on this show. So I mean, it was fun seeing these little tweaks. Like everyone would find 2 or 3 new cards to slot into existing archetypes that would really blow the lid off of everything. But yeah, just compared to every other experience I've had with card games, which is they were already so established, there was a huge card pool. It's been really interesting. So I mean, now Brian, you've been with Magic since the beginning, right?
Yes, pretty much. I mean, I've been playing Magic since, 1994? 94. So, over 20 years.
I don't want to think about or admit the age I was in 1994.
Yeah, I think he was 7.
I was 13. I started playing in 7th grade in grade school. So, yeah, basically since the beginning.
Gotcha.
All right, so you've seen a game then go from that initial release stage into what the next 20 years, right? We talked about this on the show. How do you think Hearthstone is going to where do you see it going with Hearthstone? Because people have asked us on the show, do you think we're going to see formats like we see in Magic, where it's standard and modern and all that kind of stuff?
I mean, it's hard to say really, because the growth of a collectible game, certainly, in particular, given how much emphasis Blizzard places on the new player experience, and the game being accessible to new players. As the years go on, because you have to keep adding content, it's just collectible games, as you said, prior to the release of Goblins vs. Gnomes, things had kind of gotten a little stale. You saw like a lot of even the most popular streamers really weren't really playing nearly as much, or the decks that are showing up in tournaments are mostly the same thing, maybe a couple of cards different. So you need new content to keep things fresh. But if you keep adding stuff, eventually there's so many cards that it's overwhelming to newer players, and it becomes difficult to actually get new blood into the game. I do think that eventually Hearthstone, if it proceeds in any manner similar to Magic, which I imagine it likely will, because it's a very good structure overall for keeping people interested, will have to sort of partition off what cards are used in different types of formats, or it'd be just too overwhelming for a lot of players.
Yeah, I agree. And we talked about that. I think it was like 2 weeks ago or something, that I just don't see 1,000 cards and then just like, but you just play whatever card, and because eventually combinations will come up that are just ridiculous, and that's kind of when you play. What is that? Is it vintage or whatever? Or what's the one where you can play anything?
That's vintage.
Vintage, yeah. So people play pretty much broken decks, but everyone's playing broken decks, right? So
yeah, I mean, some of that is because because Magic was the first collectible card game, they didn't have the same level of knowledge of how the systems worked that people working on collectible games now do. Yeah. And there's also in Magic, all the cards are paper cards, so you can't really just change a card. Sure. If Hearthstone didn't have the same sort of just knowledge base of its designers from years of existing collectible games and being able to understand how, like, the important elements of different systems, as well as no ability to actually change cards, yeah, you might need to have formats and rotation just based on power level issues. But I don't think that that's gonna in a game where you can actually patch and change cards, I don't think that's as big of a problem. I think the big problem just becomes that it's overwhelming.
Yeah,
they clearly don't want it to be that. 9 deck slots. They don't want anything to overwhelm.
All I want is to be able to save more decks. No, it's too complicated.
Let me turn the page. Just give me a right-facing arrow, and I can turn to another page of 9 deck slots. It's fine. But yeah,
we'll see.
There's lots of talk on that. So, so this past weekend you played in the ESL Legendary Series. I mean, you've been playing it for a couple weeks now.
I played it for the first time a couple of weeks ago, and I actually I got second place, which got me an invite to the following week, but I had to sort of defer that because I was playing in a Magic tournament that weekend. So I did play again this past week. Right.
Okay, so this was week 5 of that particular tournament, and while you didn't do as well as you did the previous week, the games you played.
I don't think it was his fault, though. No. That's Dark Wanix deck.
I was to say,
who was going to do well against that
the
deck?
Games that you played against Dark Wanix, I mean, Reddit was on fire. It was really just it was some of the best games I've seen in a while. I mean, that first game where it was his Paladin versus your Priest was just super intense, and I loved watching this like thinking man's Hearthstone. We were both just sitting there turn after turn. And you could tell that both of you were really having to think about the next move. And then, of course, the Warlock deck. But how was that series overall? Because, I mean, obviously a lot of people were talking about your reactions on camera. And
yeah, I mean, I had a lot of fun playing that series. Like you said, the first game was super interesting, super complex, and, came down to just fatigue. I ultimately, like, he sort of caught me by surprise by having the Avenging Wrath in addition to his 2 consecrations to sort of enable clearing my board with equality, and that left me sort of out of additional resources to be able to finish off the game. That was also when I had a different version of the Priest deck than the one that I have been playing since then, because I got sick of losing the fatigue, so I've changed things up a little bit. But yeah, then I played against his Warlock deck, and then he had that Fell Cannon against my Shade of Naxxramas that was apparently the funniest face I've ever seen on Reddit.
Yeah, it was the perfect answer to Shade, which I never even thought of. So.
Yeah, no, because he killed my first Shade with a Hellfire, and then I played the second one. It was like Fell Cannon. I'm like, what in the world? A, what's going on with this deck? And B, really? Come on.
Well, Fell Cannon in a non-mech deck. It was just
right.
You didn't see it coming at all. But how do you prepare for a guy like him, because he does come up with weird stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because there's a lot of value to be gained, and this was. I think that the match may have gone differently if I had played him after the first round, because the information about how his deck worked and how his deck won was really important to actually formulating a correct strategy against it. And even though I actually played against the deck 3 times, I didn't even see the power overwhelming combo until the 3rd game.
Yeah.
The first one, I just got, my stuff killed by Fel Cannon and eventually just died to minions. And then the second game, I was able to beat him pretty quickly by establishing a really powerful board of minions and, just being aggressive. And then the third game was the one where we played this sort of back and forth control game. And then ultimately he just comboed me out when, if I had realized that was what was going on, I could have taken a pretty significantly different line of play in the entire game. Yeah. So there's all these sort of dynamics that you have to really keep in mind when it comes to that sort of thing.
Yeah, Hugh actually, I was watching that series, and they were talking about it on the commentary that, he could put the arcane golem down, and then you would all of a sudden have all this information. And he ended up, I think, he did like Demon Heart or something like that to finish you off. It was so it was, he really had this confusing deck to you at that point. Right. And you didn't see Alexstrasza yet, and you hadn't seen, arcane golem. It's a combo deck that essentially just controls the board forever and then finishes you off.
Yeah, and I mean, in that game, like I was playing because I'd seen Demon Heart and things like that, Implosion. I was formulating a strategy against what I imagined a demon deck was. I was like, okay, I thought still his Twisting Nether. I can hold this for Mal'Ganis or Lightbomb or whatever. And ultimately, I had mind control as well. I'm like, okay, he's gonna play a big minion. I'm gonna, try and play around Jaraxxus or whatever. And his deck just wasn't doing that at all. So my entire plan that I was setting up against his strategy that I thought he was playing ultimately ended up just failing because his deck did something completely different.
Yeah. How much do you, like when you're building a deck for a tournament specifically, is that something you would approach a tournament thinking like, well, I'm going to make a deck that is actually kind of elusive in what my strategy looks like to people? Or do you just try to go for strongest decks?
Like different tournaments, sort of work differently. Like for instance, in Magic tournaments, I think that there's something to be gained from an element of surprise for a lot of players because of the nature of the fact that you don't necessarily easily have access to information about what people are playing. I think in a tournament like a lot of the ones run in Hearthstone, most of your opponents, because it's their broadcast round then broadcast round, everyone except for your first round opponent almost certainly knows every card in your deck. Or at least most of the core strategy of your deck. So you lose a lot of the surprise value after that point, just because of the way that tournaments are set up and broadcasted. I think it's more important to have just fundamentally sound decks. And I mean, you do gain some advantage from having a deck that your opponent might not know exactly what they mulligan for, or things like that.
But it'll get you through one round.
It's not as big later in the tournament.
Yeah, you'll get to the semis and then you'll lose there. So yeah, a better deck is a better deck. I see that.
So Brian, on your website, you spend a lot of time kind of educating folks on Hearthstone, well, card games in general, but when it comes to Hearthstone, a lot of your articles are written in an educational manner, which I really enjoy. So like take the Fel Cannon play for example. I feel like a lot of people are going to see that Fel Cannon play against your Druid and see it snipe that Shade, and everyone's just going to be slotting in Fel Cannon. When I saw that, I was like, oh, this is just the most dangerous thing for anyone who's like new into the game to see, because it's just such a perfect scenario. Like, do you ever kind of just, I mean, clearly, you being on the receiving end of that, you must have kind of thrown up your arms and just been like, come on, but what advice would
you saw my reaction.
Yeah. I mean, like, so what advice would you give to folks as far as like how to kind of digest the information they're getting from watching these games and how to actually apply it to, say, their ranked play?
I mean, I think one of the most important things, and this isn't just from information from watching tournaments, but just in general, is to, a lot of people focus on sort of best possible case scenarios for things, and like things like Unstable Portal. Unstable Portal is a card that got tons of hype like early in the GVG release, and we really haven't seen make big impact in competitive play. The mage decks that we've seen be successful are things like the Mech Mage deck that are consistent, or they're various control mage decks that again have consistent plans and play cards that are sort of based on that sort of strategy, and I think that in a lot of cases, and also like a card like Malorn, for instance, this is a card that I see people mention, like, oh, Malorn, he's so good, your opponent has to keep killing him. It's like, well, no, that's not really the way that games with Druid decks tend to go. If Malorn were, say, a Priest card, it would be a lot different, or a Warrior card. In a class that actually has tools to play games to fatigue, it's like, okay, well, this will make me never lose a fatigue game because I have Malorn in my deck, unless my opponent mind controls it, which makes mind control an even better card for fatigue games, but I digress. But yeah, it's important to recognize the way that games typically play out rather than sort of the best possible scenario for those things.
Yeah, yeah. But people look at Unstable Portal, they all kind of come to the Boulder Fist Ogre. It's like, wow, I'll get a Boulder Fist Ogre on turn 2, and then I play him on turn 3, and I win the game. It's like, well, sometimes you will,
right.
But all the other times when you get Leper Gnome, you're gonna, and you want to like lose a tournament because you did nothing on turn 2, and then on turn 3 you played a really, really weak minion. So
yeah, I mean, I was actually playing it because my chat was just insisting, oh, you have to play it, you have to play it, you have to play it. And a big part of that was just, I was just like, there was a part of me that wanted to just play it for educational purposes for my chat and be like, hey, this is, these are the actual results you get. But the other hand was, whatever, I'm going to try it out. I may have a certain idea of how a card will play out, and that can be wrong. And it's also important to, not just stick to your original instincts about cards and, evaluate them as you get more information that you can synthesize. But I had Unstable Portal in my Mech Mage deck that I was playing and tuning for originally, and basically I just never wanted to cast Unstable Portal on turn 2 because I wanted to play something that I knew would have an impact. And
chugga. Yeah,
right, exactly. It's like especially for a deck that's based on board presence and synergies, things like Mech Warper and Chugga and all that. Tinkertown Technician. You need to be developing things consistently and not just hoping to roll the dice and maybe hit Malagos or whatever.
Yeah,
which I did hit. And it was awesome. But
sure.
I probably would have won that game playing a Chugga on turn 2 too.
However, that card is super fun, and I'm having a great time with it. My RN Mage.
Yeah, no, I love, I play my Dragon Druid deck, which is crazy and wacky and fun, and you can do whatever you want in terms of how you enjoy the games, but if you're looking for the best cards to play in the best deck, I doubt that Unstable Portal is one of them.
I agree.
My favorite is still, before Gums vs. Gnomes even came out, we got to talk to Young Woo at BlizzCon, and he's just like, I just had a guy come up to me and tell me he got a wisp twice in a row with Unstable Portal.
And he's angry. At Young Woo.
Yeah. How dare you? I mentioned it at the top. Let's talk about it. Your one of your most recent Hearthstone articles is talking about Fel Reaver and also gives a really nice, I think, kind of history lesson about milling. And you also talk about card advantage. When I saw this, I was like, I need to read this because I had in my head no possible way to like make Fel Reaver work. So I was very interested to see you trying to build a deck around this card.
Yeah, and it's important to note that my argument in the article was at no point that Fel Reaver is a good card. It was that you need to understand why it's good or bad, and the context in which the drawback is matters or not. And ultimately I had Fel Reavers in my deck for a while and took them out mostly because they kept dying to Big Game Hunter, and everyone has Big Game Hunter now because of Dr. Boom being everywhere. But the actual drawback of Fel Reaver lost me virtually 0 games.
We had this issue with like I would if I was in an arena, I would take Fel Reaver over say which was 7/6 with 3 extra mana Venture Comer, because to me Venture Comer is more of a negative, and Venture Comer is a fine card in arena. It's still a big threat, but essentially what that does is it prevents you from continuing to build tempo and momentum and continue to put threats on the board. Mm-hmm. Whereas Fel Reaver just discards cards that aren't even in your hand. So it's like, well, yeah, fine. I can still play out whatever I want to play on my next turn, and I have this 8/8. So, and I think in Arena, it's just like, that's just fundamentally better card. But
I'm actually not sure which I think is better in Arena. Because Arena games also tend to be, because you don't necessarily have as focused a deck in Arena.
Sure.
You can't necessarily close out games as quickly. And if you...
It's more of a control-oriented
if you draw Fel Reaver, like, relatively late in Arena, it can actually kill you. It can actually destroy you.
Yeah.
And because your deck isn't as focused, games will typically go longer in Arena than they do in constructed play. So I'm not sure which is the right pick, but I agree that with your sort of philosophy there that, this even though this card, this card's less disruptive to my basic strategy than this other one in terms of the drawback specifically.
Yeah. But I mean, I feel like you said, that both of those cards are not as good anymore because of the prevalence of Big Game Hunter. Big Game Hunter was a card that you could play, like, maybe there would be one of. I'm seeing 2 of now in decks, and it's just, it's made anything, like I was playing Ramp Druid the other day, and I pulled Dr. Boom out because I was like, I'm ramping into something that just gets killed. No, and now I just have everything as 6 or less attack.
Absolutely, and I mean, I had lots of people criticizing the fact, in my chat, which people in my chat, sometimes bring up great ideas, sometimes less great ideas. That's the nature of Twitch chat. Hello, Twitch chat. You're watching right now. You're the good.
They're always there,
Twitch chat, though. You're the good Twitch chat. I can tell. There's no spam happening at all. But no, I mean, the vulnerability of those big minions to big game hunters is a huge deal. And it used to be that basically, like you were saying, maybe people would have one in their deck. But now, because Dr. Boom is in virtually every deck, big game hunter is in virtually every deck. And the value that you get from playing a big minion that dies to it, it's like, okay, well, I could play this, or I could play something that isn't vulnerable to it. Playing something like a Kel'Thuzad instead of a Ragnaros, say, in some sort of minion-based control deck. It's like, I'd rather have Kel'Thuzad because I'm not increasing my vulnerability to this prevalent card.
Yeah, even now, Zoo now has Sea Giants. So it's just, right now and also, you can't play it just as like a Jungle Panther anymore. If you play it just for value, it's like almost inevitably the next turn, they drop something. It's like uncanny.
Yeah, this has been just such a huge influx of large threats that, again, going back to just the influx of cards in general. I mean, before every hero had only one class legendary, and now they all have two, and a lot of them are actually playable. So yeah, you're seeing cards like Big Game Hunter come back in full force.
Yeah.
So we have to talk about Mech Mage, Brian, because more or less, you're the guy that made that deck popular and kind of conceived it. And I mean, Strife Crow credited you. I know he made some adjustments that I believe you're actually using Azure Drake in your Mech Mage now because of that's what Strife Crow took out.
Yeah, no, I think that was a very good idea, and I definitely adopted that change that he made.
Yeah, I actually wrote an article about Strife Crow's exact version, but since then I've gone back to something a little closer to what you're using. I really think Archmage Antonidas is just too good.
I love Archmage. I think Archmage is better than Dr. Boom in the deck.
Doesn't die to Big Game Hunter.
What we were just talking about. Doesn't die to Big Game Hunter.
Yeah, and with all the spare parts, you get value out of them every time. So
it's so many fireballs. It's ridiculous.
that was a card that for a long time people couldn't make work, and now you're seeing it all over the place too. So
yeah,
the spare parts thing has done wonders for Archmage Antonidas.
Yeah, I love that that's a thing. The cards that were previously considered unplayable are now seeing ranked play. I love that, seeing that kind of change.
One of the great things about like we were saying, the new sets coming out. Not only are there new cards that can change the metagame, but the way that old cards interact with the new ones is a big deal as well. You can definitely see new life breathed. I mean, or even entire new classes, or old classes that really weren't seeing play, like Paladin. Paladin was just not a deck that really was seeing much play prior to Goblins versus Gnomes. And now, with Muster for Battle, Quartermaster, Shielded Bot, Coghammer, a bunch of new tools, you're seeing Paladin decks doing very well. And then you're also seeing cards that really weren't seeing a ton of play, like Cultmaster, that go really well with the tokens made by Muster and things like that.
Yeah. So how did you land on Mech Mage? I mean, were you trying a bunch of different mech decks out?
Yeah.
And that seemed to be the one that worked best?
So, like, at the very first thing I wanted to do was just build a mech deck because, it's obviously the new, like, primary, like, linear theme of the expansion. It's like, okay, well, what can I do with these mech cards? I said, when I first saw it, that I thought Mech Warper was the best card in the set. Well before I had seen the rest of the cards in the set, I was just like, this is the scariest card in the set. Cost reduction effects, and this is something that comes from, having played, Magic for 20 years. This is the sort of thing that I have tons of experience with. These are the sort of cards that are dangerous. These are the sort of cards that are format defining. And I was like, okay, well, what's the best mech deck? And I tried Warrior first, then I tried Shaman, then I tried Shaman. No, yeah, it was Warrior, then Shaman, briefly Priest, and then I was like, okay, well, Mage has Blast Mage, which is awesome, and Snow Chugger, they're awesome, as well as just good support cards in Fireball and Frostbolt. And I was tinkering around with a bunch of different versions, and eventually got to the version that I really liked. One of the biggest changes was actually just finally deciding to play Cogmaster over Mana Worm. I was playing Cogmaster or Mana Worm for a while, and it was just super unimpressive because most of my deck was just minions. And for a while I had I was like, oh well, it grows from spare parts that I get from Gnome or that I get from Tinkmaster. And I briefly had that unstable portal in there, which made it better. And then, but adding Cogmaster made the deck so much better in not only against against control decks, but also just against other creature decks. You know, the fact that it can trade straight up with a pumped Undertaker is a huge deal. You know, when you had Mana Worm, it was like, okay, I'll play Mana Worm. And then your opponent plays Coin into Undertaker. It's like, well, if I don't have Frostbolt, I'm just behind. But with Cogmaster, you just play any 2-drop, any of your mech 2-drops, and kill their guy. So
yeah, and you pretty much always have a mech 2-drop. The other thing, too, is you're playing, the Gnome is the only other one, so it just gives you another option on turn 1, which I think is really important for that kind of deck. That deck needs to snowball, essentially.
I mean, you know, it's really hard to say that, you know, oh, I made the deck, because I mean it's a super linear deck. You know, I basically just played the mechs and the spells, and you know, like it's a sort of deck that kind of builds itself. But I certainly think that you know, I was like streaming it early on. I wrote about it on my website and sort of popularized it, but it's hard to take credit for making something that's quite so, I don't know. I think it's fairly obvious, a lot of the shell to it, but the particulars, you know, they matter.
But I think, though, a lot of people struggle with, and this is, you know, the kind of the art of deck building is, yes, I can see that these mechs work together. So let's type mech in, and let's just put a bunch of stuff in. But which ones don't I put in? And then how do I kind of complement them? And a deck like that, I think the biggest problem is, yes, you can start swarming the board early, but if you get wiped out or at some point, how are you going to finish the game? And something like Archmage is kind of the way to be able to still do that.
Yeah, so there certainly are decisions. Like I had Micro Machine in for a while. It's like, okay, this is an aggressive deck. Micro Machine's pretty good, and you know can hit pretty hard, but it was a super weak draw late in the game. And eventually I came to, okay, well, how about Annoyotron? You know, I knew I wanted another cheap mech, and Annoyotron, you know, was a sticky mech that helped ensure that my Tinkertown Technicians and my Goblin Blast Mages went off. It helped protect my my Mech Warpers from getting attacked, so I can continue to get cost discounts and things like that. So you know, those are certainly things where you look back and you're just like, oh, you just threw a pile of mechs together. It's like, there's a little more than that going on.
Sure.
But you know, it is a fairly linear strategy, so it's, you know, not particularly obscure to put together.
Yeah, who knew if you just took a Goldshire Footman, called it a mech, and put a shield on it, it would suddenly be good. I have Twitter wars with the guy who's a Goldshire Footman all the time. So that one's great.
That's a wonderful.
Hello.
I think you're shortchanging Divine Shield and the mech moniker a bit, Dills.
Both of those are a big deal.
They're big deals. No, they absolutely are.
Those are two really big changes to an otherwise unplayable card.
You only pay 1 mana for it. Not too bad. Sometimes you don't pay any more mana if you got a Mech Warper on board.
Yeah, sometimes you pay 0 mana for it because you have 2 Mech Warpers.
One of the comments I've seen thrown around, we get this on Twitter and to our email, are people saying that, oh, you guys hated on Murloc decks so much in the early vanilla Hearthstone, but on its face, mech decks seem to be more or less the same thing, which I really disagree with. And
they're very different.
Yeah,
they're very different.
I mean, one of the big things for me is just you mentioned Tinkertown Technician and Cogmaster, and both of those are cards that synergize with mechs that are not actually mechs themselves. So you do actually need to think about which decks you're putting those into, because it might not work out if you play them in proper order or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, some of it too. Like the mechs are just fundamentally stronger minions on their own than the Murlocs are. The biggest problem with the Murlocs is that so many of them just have 1 health, and they're just so bad against hero powers.
If you can kill the Ward Leader, then they all go back to 1 health, and it's bad.
Right. It's the same reason you were so down on Raid Leader for so long, Dills. I mean, it's like, well, you just take out Raid Leader, which is really easy to kill, and it's not a problem anymore.
Yeah, exactly. This is why Hearthstone differs so much from Magic too. Is a card like Raid Leader in Magic, I could just never attack with it, you know, and I might be able to keep it for a long time. But in Hearthstone, it's not going to work that way.
The value of utility-based minions is a lot different. You know, like in Magic, like a utility creature, your opponent has to have some sort of specific spell to deal with it. Whereas in Hearthstone, it's like, well, I just attack your guy.
Yeah, I just aim my dude at your dude.
You have a guy? You know what? I have a guy too. Let's trade.
How did you, when you first started playing Hearthstone, how did you feel about that? Like, did you like it? Did you hate it? Were you like, I want to be defending? What's going on?
No, I mean, you know, as we mentioned in the intro, you know, I was one of the designers of the WoW TCG, and we actually use a direct attacking system in the WoW TCG that's basically exactly the same as Hearthstone. Yeah. We had, like, Hearthstone is designed to take asynchronous turns, so you know your opponent can never do anything during your turn that isn't automated. Whereas in WoW TCG, there were like instant effects like there are in Magic, and you could have, instead of taunt minions which you have to attack in Hearthstone, there were protector minions which you could choose to block with. Okay. So it was the same sort of structure and has the same sort of pressures on like creatures and the sort of utility creatures you can have, because okay, well, what's the most important thing is what my creature gives me stat wise for its cost, unless it has some sort of ability to whether it's stealth or there was elusive in WoW TCG, which is just a creature that couldn't be attacked.
Okay, wow, just couldn't be attacked, huh? All the time.
Yep.
That seems.
Okay. It was pretty good.
That seems pretty good.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, we actually the factions were split up in that. Like you could be Alliance or Horde, and you had to play Alliance or Horde creatures. There were some generic ones, but they were mostly based on faction. And Horde had was it Ferocity, basically charge, and Alliance had Elusive, which was it couldn't be attacked. They're basically the sort of comeback mechanics for each class if they were behind on the board.
Okay.
Oh, gotcha. Oh, that's super interesting. Now I want to go back and actually play
really
more of that game.
Yeah. I never really got a chance.
Cool. I think I have like a starter deck like on my shelf somewhere. Starter deck with like the first set somewhere.
I've got Grenman Storm Speaker right next to me.
Oh, that was the product manager of WoW TCG when it launched. That was his WoW character.
Oh.
Yeah. I have unscratched Hippogriff cards just sitting on my desk.
Oh my
god. You're just buried in this stuff. Well, that's great. Well, if it's okay with everyone, I think we'll move into the card reviews. I want to talk to you about Lightbomb Priest, Brian, but I feel it's going to come naturally in our discussion about the Priest cards.
Absolutely.
All right. Well,
I have one more question. Though.
Sure thing.
Go ahead, Bill. I'm just curious to know from you, Brian, because there's been a few people who have come in from the Magic world and started to play a lot of Hearthstone. Gabe Walls was playing a lot. I haven't really seen him streaming, so I'm not really sure what's going on with him. But are there any other people that you think are going to kind of transition over? And I mean, you're not necessarily transitioned, but I mean, you still play.
No, I mean, I still play Magic. I prefer Hearthstone as a video game to Magic Online by like miles. Sure. I still really like Magic. It's still I still play in tournaments. I'm playing in a tournament, and in a couple weeks, I played a tournament a week ago. I'm still playing. I still write articles for Magic as well and make Magic strategy videos. I just don't play it as much on my computer because I have Hearthstone to do that. But there are a number of players. Like for instance, like there are some players who weren't particularly well known in Magic who are very well known in Hearthstone. Reynad was formerly a Magic player.
That's true. Yeah.
One of the most popular questions on my stream for a long time was, "Have you ever played Reynad in Magic?" And I actually never thought I had played him, but I met him at BlizzCon, and he told me that we actually played a couple times. So I now know that we're one in one lifetime for anyone who's curious.
Okay.
But also Backspace. Backspace was a Magic player.
Oh yeah.
He wasn't like a Pro Tour player, but I actually played him at Magic Nationals one year, and I beat him to make top 8. So, but yeah, there's a significant number like Paulo Vitor Damo de Rosa. He's another Magic Hall of Famer who has been playing a significant amount of Hearthstone. He's written some articles for some sites and everything. He's super good Magic player, so I would not be surprised to see him do well in Hearthstone as well.
Okay. Yeah. What like do you feel like there would be an advantage to some of these players to switch over? Because like let's say you've been kind of toiling in Magic for a long time and you haven't really made a big name. It seems like this is a fresh new scene, right? Like this would be.
I think there's definitely one of the big things that's cool to me about the Hearthstone scene. Is that you can play and you can be competitive. You may not necessarily go to like a bunch of the big events, but you can play on ladder and you can become well known through streaming and things like that, even without like having to go anywhere. Like I mean, seriously though, as someone who spent so much time traveling and going all over for Magic tournaments, because if you want to be a competitive Magic player, so much of what you have to do is just go to events. Sure. And that gets. I mean, for me, I've been doing this for forever, and I've just traveled so much that eventually I kind of got sick of it. Going to as many events as I was to try and sort of keep up with all the tournaments and keep high enough in the rankings to keep my pro level benefits and things. And frankly, like because I'm in the Hall of Fame, I don't have to worry about qualifying for events anymore. So I can just pick and choose what I go to, and pretty much just go to the big events or things that are convenient to me instead of just flying to everything. And it can be really expensive to try and be a competitive Magic player, but it's much easier to sort of get a foothold in Hearthstone both in terms of, it's just cheaper to play the game. The cards aren't as expensive, and you don't have to travel all over.
Yeah,
that's very true. A guy like Colento, has just got #1 legend, in NA and EU, and that's, game a huge name and that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
6-0 right now, got on all three at the same time.
Yeah, and I mean,
very cancerous zoo deck, but it's very good as well.
Streaming in Hearthstone is also way, there's way more people who are interested in watching it because Magic is just not a particularly good spectator game as far as like Magic Online is concerned. Hearthstone is really well designed to be something that's interesting and enjoyable to watch. You see like Trump getting 20,000+ viewers every day. When I was regularly streaming Magic, I would get a couple thousand, and I was one of the most popular, if not the most popular streamer when I was on. Yeah. So
it's tough too. If you don't know the cards, there's just so much.
Right, exactly. It's very difficult for people to follow if they're not intimately aware of what's already going on. Sure. So it's hard to actually get new people interested in watching. Whereas with Hearthstone, it's like everything's pretty clear on the board. There's sound effects and like the turns are timed, so things are always going quickly. So whenever you finish a match, you just go right into the next one. I would play in Magic tournaments when I was streaming, and I would have to wait 30 minutes until my next round started after I won. And it was like, okay, no one wants to watch me sit here. Maybe someone does, but that's kind of weird. But I mean, people are interested in watching games. So Hearthstone gives you a lot more of that as far as streaming is concerned.
Yeah, and I think that's really why it's kind of blown up. Is just how cool it is. Like, since the client came in where people can watch me play, people just don't even play themselves. They just pop in and like all of a sudden I got 3 people spectating my game. They just want to watch other people play. It's crazy.
Yeah. Oh, the spectator mode is incredible. It's super awesome.
Yeah, it's what I do on lunch now because like I'll be eating and I can't actually play, so I'll just like turn on I'll jump in my buddy's game and watch what he's doing. It's wonderful. Well, let's talk some priest cards, guys. Let's get into this strategy segment.
It's very hard.
Wanna blow something up? Time to pay.
All right, guys, you voted, and actually, Priest tied with Warlock, but the previous week, Priest came in second, so we used that as the tiebreaker. So we're talking Priest cards this week, and like we said at the top show, very good thing that Mr. Kibler is here, because you like yourself some Priest, I hear.
I do. I have probably played more games of Priest than anything else, which is saying a lot considering how long they can take.
Yeah, you really can. You queue up against the Warrior, and it's just like, sometimes I just want to concede. I just don't even want to. I don't want to get all the way to the end and then die to fatigue, and I spent 20 minutes playing that game.
It's like, I gotta be somewhere in 15 minutes.
I've been working out every morning, pretty much, playing Hearthstone on like my iPad, on the stationary bike downstairs, and when I'm playing Priest, I go to fatigue in multiple ways.
That's great. Well, we've been going in alphabetical order, so we're kicking it off with Light of the Naaru, which is not nearly as exciting as kicking it off with. I think we did Bolvar last week, so we started it with the legendary for the Paladin. This week we're starting with a not particularly exciting spell. Light of the Naaru is a 1-mana rare spell. It reads, restore 3 health. If the target is still damaged, summon a Light Warden. So this is a card I don't know why I would use this. Yeah, I'm not sure why I would be playing Light of the Naaru.
Well, it's a 1-mana light, or what is it? 1-mana Dark Bomb. If you got a Akanai on the board, that's not bad.
That is true.
And you always summon Light Warden, by the way. If you have the Akanai on board, it essentially always summons it because the target will always be damaged at the end. So, it's interesting.
I think Light of the Naaru is a card that I experimented with a little bit early on. Ultimately, I ended up abandoning it in my Priest decks because it's rarely consistently what you want. Like as a cheap spell, it doesn't always interact with the board. You have to have an Akanai, and rarely do I feel like I actually want a Light Warden. It's just kind of a bonus. Like as one cost heal 3, it's like, okay, maybe this is actually an effect I want. Sometimes you get a Light Warden, but it's rarely super impactful. I actually tried it in a weird Priest deck that had a ton of 1-cost spells and Gazlo as sort of the end game condition. That didn't work out too well.
Yeah, that's okay. Well, see, I look at this card though, and I do see synergy with like Wild Pyromancer and stuff like that too, because You know, you could do cheap spells with Pyro is pretty good, and we know Priest is the class that tends to make the most use out of Pyro. But I feel like there's just so many cards I want in my Priest deck that I can't justify this being one of the ones that makes it.
That's a big part of the problem. You know, you already have like Powered Shield, which is almost a guaranteed fit, especially if you're playing with Pyromancer. And then I feel like Holy Smite is just a better one-cost option in at least the way the metagame is right now, because you want to be able to actually do something on turn 1 productively against opposing minions.
No, that's very true. Plus with Vol'jin now, that card got much better.
We'll talk more about that when we get to it, but it definitely helps give Smite more value later in the game in matchups where it otherwise wouldn't have it.
Yeah, true.
I've also smited a lot of people right in the face for the win.
Yeah, that's true. You got Smite on turn 1. It's a good play, always. If you change this card to say 1 mana, restore 3 health, if the target's still damaged, draw a card, do you think that it would be a playable card then?
Anything that says draw a card...
You're like, yeah, let's put that in there.
I mean, seriously, it's interesting though, because drawing cards in some matchups, that actually is questionable, because if you are likely to go to fatigue, that's potentially a drawback.
Yeah.
And I do think that's would be a pretty powerful effect. Certainly helps you stay alive better against without you aren't expending resources to keep yourself alive against, say, Hunter or Zoo. And then still has the Akanai synergy and the Injured Blademaster synergy. So that would be a stronger card for sure in my mind.
Yeah.
Just because the Light Warden is rarely really what you're interested in when you're playing a Priest deck.
Yeah. Yeah. The point you make about always drawing the card for the 1 mana spell, it just seems like you're just always going to want that over this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Dills, if we were to assign our usual letter grades, what did you end up giving Light of the Naaru?
Well, I gave it a C in constructed because I think at worst it's just average. But again, I would put higher than C cards in my deck, So, I feel like you could build the deck around it. I feel like in Arena it's actually just worse because you never know if you're going to actually get real value from it. So,
okay,
a D in Arena.
D in Arena. Okay, I gave it D's across the board. I'll give it a plus in constructed. You made some good points with Akanai, but I'm still not stoked about Light of the Naaru. Brian, you didn't help. But let's move on to the next one, which I feel like Brian, you'll have some things to say about this. Lightbomb, which is a 6 mana epic rarity spell. It reads deal damage to each minion equal to its attack. This is not enemy minions. If you haven't played this card yet, it does affect your own minions, so that's important to note. I like Lightbomb. Brian, I mean, I've seen you talk about it on stream. You've written about it in your articles. While it does affect your own board, it's okay though, because you're playing it on your turn. You can control it. You can have some semblance of, you can kind of bend it to your will, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I probably like Lightbomb more than most likely almost anyone in the world. I think this card is great. I don't think it's a card that the initial Priest decks I was building for GVG had multiple Lightbombs. I'm only playing 1 in my most recent Priest deck because it is just an expensive card that is situational, but it is very, very powerful in lots of situations and very good against a lot of the things which typically could give Priest decks problems. One of the big issues that Priest decks had prior to GVG was just dealing with giants out of handlock decks, and in particular dealing with multiple giants at once. Sometimes you'd be able to deal with a giant with Shadow or Death, or maybe even 2 with multiple Shadow or Death, but then you're just out. But if your opponent tries to just spill their hand of giants on the board, if you have a Lightbomb in your deck, you can just wipe them out.
No, that's a really good. It really does help with that particular matchup. The reason why I would never consider running 2 of this is that because when I play Priest, I'm generally playing a board control style anyway. So for me to use 6 mana to then wipe a board, I've probably been trying to clear the board as much as I can every turn prior to that anyway. So, one of the you mentioned that specific scenario. Another scenario I think it's really good in is opponent plays Dr. Boom. I can just kill him and the bombs, right then and there. But the issue that I come to is when I play if I play against a druid or something, none of his minions will die from Lightbomb. None of the druid minions will die. So there's some rough scenarios as well with Lightbomb.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not a card that's always going to be great. It's a card that has it has highs and lows. But I mean, you have the ability to set it up too. And you can attack your minions with theirs and then light bomb. A lot of times you'll have some number of minions on board, and with things like Dark Cultist, you can often make it so that damaging your own minions isn't as big a deal. You sacrifice a Dark Cultist, attack into one of their guys, buff one of your guys that now has huge health, and then light bomb and kill your opponent's stuff.
And your guy lives. Yeah.
There's also a lot of situations like, for instance, Muster for Batter with Quartermaster. That's something which you need to have either Auchenai Circle or Pyromancer or Holy Nova to be able to deal with if you're playing a priest deck. And Light Bomb allows you to kill it without any sort of combination of cards. It just wipes all their 3/3s off the board with just one card.
Yeah.
And in the worst scenario too, in a lot of matchups, you can just use it as a really bad Shadow Word Death to kill a 5/5.
Just kill one creature. Yeah, kill Sylvanas.
Sometimes it just comes up. Lots of priest games go really long, and in some cases you're just spending turns not actually playing cards, just passing back and forth. You frequently, in some of these control versus control matchups, just have a lot of mana.
Yeah. I think the handlock, though, that's the one thing, and there's a lot of handlock right now. Like, that one matchup is hard enough for Priest that this card... I'm going to up my grades, man. You convinced me. Because I run into handlock all the freaking time, and I don't want to run double Big Game Hunter in my Priest deck, because, again, it's packed to the gills with all this stuff that I need. So
right. I mean, one of the cards that I hated having in my priest decks for a long time was Shadow Word Death, because there's so many situations where I'd have Shadow Word Death where it just didn't do anything. I couldn't even chip away at my opponent's board because there's a bunch of creatures with 4 power or whatever. And Light Bomb against those creatures can do something at least. You can Light Bomb now and then maybe deal some damage to your creature, or deal some damage to them the previous turn, then Light Bomb the next turn to actually chip away at those bigger minions. So yeah. I think it's not necessarily the effect itself is always going to be great, but you can set it up to be good in more situations than it seems.
All right, I'm in. Light Bomb, I'm in.
What were your grades, Dills?
B- across the board. I think in Arena it's actually probably always a little bit better even in Constructed, because Arena goes late often, and you'll probably be able to kill a bunch of stuff with it. So
it's very true.
But I think still B-. I think it's just under the best cards.
All right. Well, thanks to Brian, we're in more or less of agreement then, Dills, because I gave it B+ across the board. I really like Light Bomb a lot. Let's talk about Shadowbomber.
Do we really have to, though?
We do, because that's what we signed up for, Dills. We just.
I think we could get through this one pretty quick.
All right, real quick for the audio listeners, it's a 1-mana epic minion. It has 2 attack, 1 health, and it has a battle cry that reads, "Deal 3 damage to each hero." I don't like this.
Just call this Dennis. Just literally. On turn 1, you get to do 3 damage to the other guy. Awesome.
I don't like this card at all.
I think they want Shadow Priest to be a thing, and this could be cool in some sort of a really spell-heavy, kind of aggressive-y priest deck that tries to finish you off with Auchenai and zombie chows and all that kind of crazy stuff. But yeah, I don't see this being played very much.
Yeah, I mean,
what do you think? Is there anywhere this would go?
I think that classes in Hearthstone have a lot of difficulty taking on roles that go against their hero power. That priest decks and warrior decks are generally what you're going to see as most of the control decks, because they have hero powers that can extend the game by restoring health or gaining armor. And Shadowbomber is a card that is clearly intended for an aggressive deck. This would be an unbelievable Hunter card.
Yeah.
Because Hunter hero power synergizes really well with just damaging both players. You want to end the game quickly. So as a priest card, though, it takes a really specific sort of deck for this to potentially be effective. And when you don't draw the right cards, like your Shadow Form or something, you don't have use of your hero power to actually end the game with it. So I don't think that this is likely to be a card that we see in a lot of competitive decks in the near future. Maybe once there's more cards that are directed in this in this vein for Priest, we might. But I don't think it's really going to do anything anytime soon.
This is one of those cards.
Mess around with an aggro priest. I'm just going to say that right. I did try.
Oh, good. I would like that to be a thing. I mean,
you take people by surprise. I'll put that out there. Nobody sees it coming. When they get mind blasted on turn 2, they might think that something's going on, but
Yeah, the cards like this, like Shadowbomber and, for example, Tree of Life, which we haven't talked about yet because we haven't done Druid. These cards that I just can't find a use for makes me wonder. It makes me curious if certain cards are being added because the folks over at Team 5 know what's coming down the pipe.
I mean, As you know, as someone who has worked in TCG design, sometimes that's what's happening, and sometimes it's just you want to have things that encourage people to play in a different style than they're used to. If basically every hunter deck has been aggressive, and then you have a card like the Sniper or like Colpet or Gazrilla, which these clearly don't go into these aggressive decks, but they encourage you to try and build something sort of outside the box of what you typically see. And even if those decks aren't like the best, even if they're not competitive, they're things that people have fun exploring, and it's important that element of collectible games exists as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a really good point.
I did try, I seriously did try an aggro priest deck, and I actually won like 4 games with it. I had like Leroy in there and all the charge minions and stuff, arcane golems. The problem is you don't have ways to really buff them. Well, you kind of do now, because you have Velen's Chosen. So I was able to like do that, and then like 6 damage mind blast and all this kind of crazy stuff. But I only played it on casual because I was like, this can't work. There's no way this works. And then I actually won a bunch of games. So I don't know. But
there is something to be said for screwing with the meta. I mean, at some point you can catch your opponent off guard.
And I did every single time. Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the things that's we were talking about earlier with Dark Wanix's Warlock deck. You just didn't know what's going on with it, or that's one of the things that can be a challenge when you run into a Warlock playing ranked. So, is it Handlock or is it Zoo? They're completely different. So
yeah. Or is it now Dark Wanix?
A lot of value to the element of surprise.
Yeah. Well, Shadowbomber, spoiler alert on Dills' grades, we both gave it Ds across the board. We weren't super stoked about Shadowbomber. So let's move on to Shadowboxer, a significantly more exciting card. It's a 2-mana rare minion. It has 2 attack, 3 health, and it reads, whenever a character is healed, deal 1 damage to a random enemy. So this seems very Knife Juggler-esque.
It essentially is. It's a priest Knife Juggler, but he can't play. Never mind. I'll let you finish.
it's okay. I like this card. I'm not in love with it. Obviously, Knife Juggler still a little better. I prefer 3/2s to 2/3s anyway, and also everyone plays minions. It's just it always happens.
That's the biggest issue with Shadowboxer compared to Knife Juggler, is that Knife Juggler automatically synergizes with something that you want to do, which is play out minions, and that you do, you're advancing the game state by playing minions each turn and getting a bonus for it. Shadowboxer, you have to be generally spending resources to heal something, and then the random effect, you have to be investing in something, and then you're getting a random output. So the random output being the same as Knife Juggler on a body that's basically comparable, if not arguably worse, because it's a 2/3 instead of a 3/2, just doesn't really cut it for me.
I feel like if Priest had something similar to, say, Paladin's Muster for Battle, if there's some sort of like a sprinkling healing effect where it would kind of randomly hit a bunch of things. Circle and Holy Nova. The problem is you already have to set a board up to have a bunch of minions already there.
Like you have to manufacture a game state wherein you can heal things, and you're going to get value out of damaging your opponent's guys.
Yeah. So like if Priest had Whirlwind and then this and then Circle, or like you could like Pyro, play a Wild Pyro or something like that.
Cabal Shadow Priest your opponent's healing stream totem and Whirlwind.
Yeah.
It's just
too many things have to go
against a warrior.
Too many things have to go right for this to do what a Knife Juggler does already.
Right, exactly.
Like, that's just bad.
I hope that happens very soon and I can see it on a Trolled-In video, because that's what you just described, Brian, is amazing.
Oh, no, it will happen there, yeah. I actually gave this the wrong... I was put these in the wrong boxes. This is a C- card, I think. I don't think it's terrible, because it's still 2/3 for 2. So, at the end of the day, it's fine. It's a 2/3 for 2. But...
Yeah, I went a little higher. I gave it a C+ in Constructed and Arena, just because there's just something about it. I on the last week I gave a few cards a little extra bump to their grade just because I liked it. I feel like I'm doing that here. It's like I want this card to work. I want there to someday be a deck where Shadowboxer work because it seems so damn fun. But yeah, no, it's a average card at best. So, onwards and upwards to Shrinkmeister, which, oh man, so much to say about this card. It had one hell of effect on the game. It costs 2 mana. It's a common minion. It has 3 attack, 2 health, and it has a battle cry. Give a minion -2 attack this turn. Not random minion. I love this card. Slap an A on it. It's done.
Yeah, this card's good.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, the synergies of Shrinkmeister have been well found out and talked about at length. I think we even mentioned it on the show, Dills, already. But I mean, just to kind of wrap this up into a nice little review, this puts so many things in range of priest removal that previously was not in range. Your Cabal Shadow Priest now can steal all kinds of amazing things. Like the fact that you can now mind control value minions long before turn 10 just makes me so happy.
Yeah, I mean, you could take Azure Drakes and Yetis and Cairn and all kinds of stuff. Unfortunately, you have to wait for turn 8 to be able to do all that stuff. And
that's the problem that's actually made me shrink away from Shrinkmeister. I was originally really high on it. I really liked this card when I saw it revealed. It's one of the cards that I drew in the first deck that I played in BlizzCon. Playing the GVG demo there. And the card set seems awesome, and I don't think, in my opinion, at least in the decks that I've tried to use it in, it hasn't really worked all that well. Because unless you have your own early minions, like if you're playing, say, an Undertaker Priest deck, this card seems like it's probably great. Because you can use it just as an early guy to, shrink your opponent's, say your opponent plays a Knife Juggler, you have a Zombie Chow, you Shrinkmeister their Knife Juggler and just attack in and kill their guy instead of trading, and that's awesome. But if you're playing a control deck that doesn't have those early minions, you lose a lot of the value of it as just a 2-drop, 3/2 body that can shrink a guy. You're only playing it for combo potential. And at that point, your deck is like getting kind of clunky and really situational. And you end up with these, drawing Shrinkmeisters when you don't have other halves of the combo or vice versa. And I found that it just didn't work out particularly consistently to me.
Yeah.
So I feel though, and I just think it needs the right shell. And I don't think the all combo stuff with Shrinkmeister and spells and things is really the way to go. I think you need low-cost minions to go with it.
When I was testing around with this card, I found that I couldn't do this and Wild Pyro control kind of stuff. I had to kind of decide
they're different
one or the other. So I really liked this in the Death Rattle Lead Priest
that's
because
exactly
I could make better trades, and I didn't really like it. But in those decks also, you still play things like Cabal, and I also found that playing the one Shadow Madness and this. And then, Shrinkmeister and Recombobulator was just too fun not to do. So, and then also recombobulating your Cabals, you almost always get a better result for a 6 mana cost card. So there was just this card just changed what I was doing with my priest deck. And that, to me, was what was fun about it. So
for sure, yeah.
I love this card.
It opens up a lot of cool new stuff. And this is actually one of the cards that kind of got me off of wanting to play Ysera as a big finisher in my control deck.
Oh, yeah.
Because I kept running into people who had this. And, the fact that they can mind control my Ysera with Cabal Shadow Priest just made the card super unappealing to me, because the whole goal of Ysera is to win these long attrition games, and when it's vulnerable to that, it loses so much of that appeal.
Yeah, if you mind control and it costs your entire mana bar, that's one thing. But if you mind control and play a 4/5 and play a 3/2 and take your Ysera and still have 2 mana to spare, that's a totally different thing.
Yeah.
You can heal up the possibly damaged Ysera for
exactly.
for extra grief points.
But yeah, I mean, you're right, Brian, that it's tough to make it work in that kind of deck. So I think what essentially this card is it's a card that goes in a different kind of priest deck. You can't just
which is cool.
shoehorn it into the original style.
Right. I mean, like we were saying, one of the goals of a new set for a collectible game is to encourage people to build different types of decks. And I think this does that. I haven't found a shell that I've been super thrilled about that includes it, but it's definitely a promising card.
So you're running 0 of this right now?
I have 0 of this in my control priest deck I've been playing.
All right.
And people keep asking me, why no Shrinkmeister? And
where's the
Shrinkmeister that I give them?
All right.
Now, this is still, as far as Arena is concerned, a snap pick.
Insane in Arena.
I mean,
in Arena, it's a 3/2 for. I mean, it's a 2-drop. So boom, I need.
It's a 2-drop that has insane possible value later in the game.
Right.
It's when you can top. Oftentimes I top deck, a friggin' Raptor, and I'm just like, oh my god, he just top decked an Ogre, I top decked a Raptor. If I top deck a Shrinkmeister, I can save my minion. So.
Yeah,
exactly. So I think I may swap my grades around. I think I'd end up giving Shrinkmeister being constructed in a Arena. Dills, what'd you end up giving?
I'm still giving it A's because I just like the cards. The time when I recombobulated, Cairn, and then got another fresh Cairn of my own. Those times are just too fun.
Oh, that's so dangerous, that line of thinking.
I know, but it's just too fun. I agree with everything Brian said, but this card I just had way too much fun with. So, and I was playing a different style of priest deck, so it was working wonders for me.
Cool. Well, onward to Upgraded Repair Bot. This is a 5-mana rare mech minion. Has 5 attack, 5 health, and it has a battle cry that reads, give a friendly mech +4 health. Again, not random. You actually get the target which friendly mech gets this ability. But I don't know. This is another card. I haven't had a whole lot of experience playing with Upgraded Repair Bot yet. But it's a card that just on its face seems a little average to me.
Yeah, I mean it's a 5/5 for 5 at its worst. So, but I don't know. Priest mech just hasn't really been a thing yet. So,
right.
I don't know. Did you stumble upon Priest mech while you were on your way to Mage mech?
That was one of the things that I tried, and it wasn't really that impressive. I found that the value of the most powerful card in the mech decks is Mech Warper. And Mech Warper is best with small minions because your Mech Warper is more likely to be alive. You can possibly use multiple Mech Warpers to power out multiple cheap minions in the same turn. So once you get up to the 5s, you're all that much less likely to be able to actually use the discount from Mech Warper. And this effect is only good if you have a mech that is particularly valuable to keep around. And
you don't want to put this on a Noyotron.
Right. I mean, it could be good in a Noyotron. Making your opponent actually hit it for a lot could be pretty strong. But
it's not a threat. You're not doing
right. It's not really the same sort of like swingy effect of like say a Goblin Blast Mage. Goblin Blast Mage costs less, and frankly, I think the effect is stronger in terms of its immediate impact on the board in a lot of cases.
I agree with that. I think, though, if Priest mech does become a thing, this card will be very good in it because it synergizes with essentially what Priest already does. Yeah. That being said, I don't think that the mechs that currently exist already kind of work with Priest, and that's, I think, where the problem is. Like this card is decent on its own if you look at it, but then if you look at what the other mechs do, they don't line up with what Priest does already. So, yeah, it's fine card. It's a 5/5 for 5. I gave it a C in Arena because it's a 5/5 for 5, and a B- because maybe there's a mech deck that gets a lot of value out of it in Constructed.
It's a similar thing. I gave it a C+ in Constructed because I think at least you have the option of building a deck that might make use of this in the future, and I gave it a C in Arena. I think it's just an average card. It's okay.
Yeah. If I'm gonna play a 5/5 for 5, I'd rather play Lothar, honestly. So.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
really? Why?
Well, Brian, you see.
We're going to teach Brian Kibler why Lothar is a good card. That's going to happen.
All right, on to Velen's Chosen. Got to play this card a lot at BlizzCon and haven't really touched it much since. It's a 3-mana common spell, and it reads, give a minion +2/+4, and spell damage +1, and then in really tiny text, because why the hell not? This is a funny card. I don't know. This definitely has a place in, I think in Arena. I haven't gotten it to work in Constructed, nor have I really seen it used to great effect in Constructed.
That aggro priest I was talking about, man. 6 damage mind blasts.
Yeah, I actually think this is a card that has surprised me in terms of how powerful it has been when it's been played against me. Yeah. Like if in the priest mirror, in a lot of cases, you just have the same creatures running at each other, and also just when you're playing against other decks, you'll frequently just have each of you have relatively similarly sized guys at various points in the curve, and this is a big boost. +2/+4 is a big boost to your minion, and if it doesn't get silenced, you can heal. 4 toughness or 4 health is a lot when it comes to your ability to just keep something around with healing. This is not a card I've experimented with all that much, but I mean, this is a really powerful card to even just cast in Wild Pyromancer turn 3. If you have a Pyromancer that survives a turn, which is questionable, who knows how in the world that happened against a creature deck. It's just a very powerful effect. You make a huge Pyromancer that you can keep around. But say in a Priest Mirror, it's like, okay, I cast Dark Cultist, you cast Dark Cultist, I cast Velen's Chosen on my Dark Cultist. It's like, oh well, now I'm just so far behind unless I have a way to deal with this right away. So I do think this is a card that has potential and might fit into some more sort of aggressively oriented, like Undertaker style decks. That's a card I definitely want to experiment when I'm going to be trying more aggressive priest decks.
Yeah, I really think that this card is actually very good, like in Arena, because you can you can oftentimes like play your 2-drop, then they play a 2-drop, and then you buff your 2-drop and you kill their and you suddenly have like a really powerful one that. And I've gotten to a lot of points where I don't have a turn 4 play. So if I have another 2-drop, which I often draft a ton of, on turn 4, I can then play my second 2-drop, heal my Velen's Chosen minion, and keep going. And I just have a huge tempo lead at that point.
I mean, in Arena, like Blessing of Kings is like an okay card. It's not a great card, but it's an okay card.
You 1/1 stick around a lot more in Arena.
Right. Well, and in Priest, you can heal the guy and keep it around. You know, when you're investing multiple cards in a single minion in Paladin, you don't really have the tools to ensure that your guy sticks around. But in Priest, you know, you have a hero power that's going to allow you to keep that minion around a lot. It's a really powerful Arena card, I think.
Yeah, I feel like though in Constructed where it falls flat for me is I don't have that many spells that do damage to begin with. I'm pretty much using Holy Nova and Smite, and so I'm using spell power for 2 spells. I've even gone into 1 Holy Nova in a lot of decks in the past, too, because I'm trying to fit so many other things in. So I feel like if this was a 3/4 without the spell damage, I would actually like it a little bit more. But, you know, it's still a fine card. It's just, I think that...
The primary value of this is definitely in the stat boost.
Yeah.
You know, I think that a lot of decks will not care about the spell damage at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of funky.
It's always going to be good.
Yeah, although we were previously talking about how to get rid of a Quartermaster and a bunch of 3/3s. This, you know, that spell damage. Now your Holy Nova just takes care of it.
That is true. Yeah, if
it is true. I think I would use Wild Pyromancer for that, generally speaking. But
definitely more.
It's another tool if that's what you're looking for.
Definitely more consistent. I don't know what.
Or I'd rather just have an Azure Drake and do this all on turn 10 and draw a card too while I'm at it. So,
there you go. That also is an option. Now, as far as our grades are concerned, chat rooms like losing their mind. They're like, this thing needs above an A+ in Arena. Now, usually I reserve A's for cards that are good when I'm behind, and I don't necessarily think this is because if I have nothing on the board, this card is useless.
Oh no, this is a really bad card when you're behind.
I would not even consider giving Velen's Chosen an A. I do think it's a snap pick in Arena, but I don't think it's necessarily A quality. So I give it a B in Arena. I gave it a D in Constructed. I'm not optimistic with Velen's Chosen in Constructed.
But see, like most of the time, in Arena, I'd rather if this was up against a 3/4 with Death Rattle, buff another minion, I would take that over it. I'd rather play another creature in most cases than buff my original creature.
Okay.
So it's debatable. Like I don't think it's an A. I gave it a B though. I think it's like a good card. I think all the time.
I think it was a little harsh in Constructed. What you guys were talking about making me come around, but we change grades here all the time.
There's more things in the 3 slot that I'd rather have in Constructed that I can choose to have, whereas in Arena, I don't get to choose everything. So that's why it's really good there.
Gotcha. All right, well, let's go out swinging. We've got Vol'jin still to talk about. He is a 5-mana legendary minion. He has 6 attack, 2 health, and a battle cry that reads, swap health with another minion. This just gets an A across the board from, I think, everyone here. I'm not going to speak for you, Brian, but...
Vol'jin's great.
Vol'jin's an amazing card.
Yeah. I originally had thought that you needed to be playing a more minion focused deck to really maximize Vol'jin, but it has been just an incredible tool in my my Control Priest deck recently. As I was mentioning earlier, one of the problems that you can often have with Control Priest is just having too many dead reactive cards in a lot of matchups, and Vol'jin allows you to basically have a turn your smites into Shadow Word Death slate in the game, or Shadow Word whatevers, because it doesn't matter what the power of the creature is. Just by and also getting a big minion on the board in the same turn. It allows you to have a big tempo swing with Vol'jin plus Smite to get rid of their big minion and play a big minion. The card is very good.
It only costs you 6 mana to do that, and you end up with a non-BGH target.
Yeah, when I first saw this card, I thought it cost 6 and still thought it was good. So it's very difficult to add a mana to a card and for it to still be attractive. And I think this is a card that could cost 1 more and still be good.
Yeah. Who knows? Maybe one day it will. But I think that this card is just kind of, the Velen, the other Priest Legendary, was just not really in very many decks. It was in very specific Priest decks. Now Priests actually have a class Legendary that's very useful to pretty much almost any Priest in Constructed at this point, whether Death Rattle or the Control style. However, I think slightly down ticket in Arena just because you're relying on the other guy to have a big minion, and you're relying on you to have a minion on the board that can trade with it. But still really good. I'd still pick this all the time.
I don't know. You see some pretty wonky taunt minions with high health in Arena that are still annoying to get through. I still love this card in Arena.
A- rather than A, because I can't auto put in some stuff to use on that too.
I don't know if you don't give it A, there might be some voodoo going on, and you might not make it to next week's show.
I feel chat room rumbling right now.
Yeah, chat room's probably like, what? This is better than A+. But no, so it's an amazing card. I'm glad that they put in a card like this for Priest, because it really sucked. Like, I had Velen sitting there. I'm like, this card looks like so good, and I just can't. The Velen in like a mage would be insane, right? But Velen in a Priest just never really made the grade. So I'm glad they got something usable.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we talked about this last week. I'm sitting on just enough dust for one more legendary, and I can't decide whether I want to go with Vol'jin because I really want to play Priest, or make Dr. Boom because he fits into a decent amount of decks as a neutral.
Probably make Dr.
Oh, but I want Vol'jin so bad. I really want to craft Vol'jin.
Vol'jin when I was opening packs was the first card that I was just hoping to open basically. My entire chat while I was cracking through my packs, we were doing various Vol'jin voodoo dances of like opening the cards in certain patterns and stuff, and ultimately I had to craft him. He didn't come to my summon.
Yeah, I got pretty rotten luck on my first 60 packs as far as my legendaries were concerned. So, well, all right, that brings us to the end of our Priest review, which means, guys, it's time to round out the show with some emails.
Hello.
Hello, it's me.
Hello.
Just quickly, did you get my message?
Yep.
Oh.
Hello, brother.
You can send your emails to tacpodcast@gmail.com. And this week, I kind of just Frankenstein a bunch together because we got quite a few from our listeners regarding the goodgaming.com tournament.
Yeah. This is pretty much everyone. This is all people want to talk about.
Exactly. So, two that stood out were from listeners Semi-Charmed and Alum. Thank you guys, and thank you everyone else who tweeted in and whatnot. This was on our Reddit upvoted, and everyone wanted to talk about this. We knew we were bringing Brian on, and we're like, well, fine. We'll move this to emails. We'll skip news this week because we need to make time for something. But there's no way we're getting out of this episode without bringing this up at least once. So for those of you who are not familiar, goodgaming.com ran an open tournament this past weekend, and all kinds of terrible, poorly run things ensued. Now, I need to say this. I didn't participate in it. Dills, you didn't participate in it, to my knowledge.
I wasn't going to play a tournament all weekend.
Right. Brian, you were getting you were going up against some insane Warlock decks, so you didn't play in this.
But a lot of people did play in this.
Right.
It was on the BattleNet launcher.
Right.
It was advertised there. So
yes.
A lot of people got involved in this.
I just felt I had to get that out of the way. So everything we're mentioning here is from articles and what listeners who did participate in it have told us. So just take that as it will.
I saw a lot of feedback from people who were participating in it over Skype chat over the weekend who were not happy.
No.
Nobody ended this thing happy.
Did the tournament finish? I don't even know.
I have no clue.
I don't either. There's one of the things I want to.
Sounded like the organizers rage quit at some point.
Yeah. There's a really long, detailed article over on HearthstonePlayers.com written by author Katie, who went into deep detail over everything, and even that article didn't mention if it actually properly finished or not. So I'm still a little bit in the dark there. But to kind of sum up or shorten everything that went wrong, the first big thing that was a red flag to a lot of people were all of the absurd things you had to do to register and play in this thing. So apparently to play in this tournament, one had to sign up on the goodgaming.com website and pay the $5 entry fee. Then they also had to sign up on challenge.com. Then they also had to sign up to TeamSpeak and download and configure the client. Then they had to make sure and read all the rules, which apparently were there were 5 or more documents sent to them in Google Docs that they had to read. And then I guess connecting to the TeamSpeak was a total nightmare. They weren't sure what room they were supposed to go into. They had to wait for the check-in email. They couldn't just go to the website and check in. They had to wait till they got an email before they could do that. Then they also had to separately check in at the challenge.com site. I've used Challenge. I love Challenge, but
yeah, it works great.
If I had to do 30 other things on top of it, I'm sure it would have driven me to madness. And then you also had to wait for your bracket email, and then you had to find and add your opponent on Hearthstone, which that's, again, kind of normal stuff, but not on top of everything else they had to do here. And then on top of that, they had all kinds of time changes and whatnot. Folks were told to show up at one time, and then it was changed, I believe, 2 or 3 more times. And then
some people played games, and then those games didn't.
Yeah, I heard the brackets reset multiple times.
Yeah.
People got paired, and then they were told, "Oh no, we're resetting the brackets." Like people had already played matches, and everything was reset.
Yeah.
People had winning records, and then somehow weren't in the next round, and it was just all sorts of everything that could go wrong did go wrong in this tournament.
Yeah, our listener Semi-Charmed, who wrote in, he went through exactly this. He so the time was changed from 5 to 6, then 6 to 7, then 7 to 8. He played at 8, and then finished his matches. Went back to check the bracket. It had been wiped clean. The time change had been changed to 8:30, which it was now 8:40 because their games went 40 minutes. And then he was no longer even on the bracket. And then he writes them being like, "Hey guys, I can't play anymore because I'm no longer on the bracket." Then he got kicked from TeamSpeak, and he emailed them, and he still hasn't gotten a refund. So it's just been.
I mean, $5 isn't that much, but it sucks that it's just money got paid to these people.
Oh, right.
And they didn't. I don't know. It seems like if you're going to run something like this, you need to test drive this process.
Yeah, I mean, what's so shocking to me is that this event was advertised like on the launcher, and it was this big of a debacle. If this was just some site that had advertised something on Reddit or whatever that people got involved in, these things go wrong. Running events, especially big events with lots of people online, can be really difficult.
Absolutely.
But this is an event that apparently had sort of this official thumbs up from Blizzard because they advertised it, through Battle.net, and it was shocking to see how badly it went.
And it's disappointing because I want there to be these big open events. Like I want there to be non-invite style events for people to play in, because we need to continue to kind of support that, and players we don't know come up and they can kind of burst through. And these type of events is how you do that, and this is discouraging.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the type of stuff is great for esports. I mean, I follow StarCraft very closely, and in the early days of StarCraft 2, that's what made MLG so popular, is because they had the open bracket. You had these wonderful stories of people who bought in for whatever the entry fee was and made it all the way to the champion stage. So this kind of stuff is great, and we need it. And this is just such a black mark. I don't want to see this. I mean, I feel like we're beyond this, and. Yeah, exactly like you said, Brian. The fact that it seems so legit because of the outlets it was being promoted through. I mean, I saw it on every single one of the Hearthstone outlets I go to, on top of the officially on Blizzard's launcher.
Yeah.
So,
not only that, it was on a bunch of sites and stuff too. And it's just, they must have spent a bunch of money to get that out there. But I really hope that whoever is in charge of putting things in the launcher is going to be a little bit more on the ball and do a little more due diligence before they start including stuff like this, because it just seemed like the people who did this, they had all of the promotional and marketing ducks in a row, but when it came to running a tournament, they had no idea how to do that. So just, if you don't know how to run a tournament, practice that.
I mean, in particular, this was an open tournament. Well, one of the things that was sort of a quirk of this, and that is hugely difficult to actually organize over a big open bracket of players who aren't necessarily all super invested in it, is just a Swiss format tournament. I love Swiss format tournaments. That's how the vast majority, almost all Magic tournaments are run, because you get unlucky in an early round or whatever, you have a chance to battle back. But when you're running a huge open tournament like this, where your communication channels with players are questionable at best. Trying to do something which requires people to be, available at indeterminate intervals throughout a long period of time just is not a good idea, I think. I think that maybe if they run single elimination, double elimination, very good chance it would have gone a lot better.
Now, the first time I actually watched you stream, Brian, was when you were in that Sunshine Open, which I actually played in as well. And I got eliminated in the 4th or 5th round or something like that. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go see if anybody's streaming. And you were streaming, and I watched you go all the way to the top 4 or whatever that day. That was an open tournament, and that seemed like, what was your experience there? It seemed like it was really well done,
was that tournament was run very well. I mean, there were some hiccups early on. That was a single elimination tournament, so there's a lot less logistical issues to deal with who's playing who at any point. There's just a big bracket that can easily fill in, that you can even play ahead of people, which is one of the great things in single elim. It's like, okay, well, these 2 people in this bracket are ready, so they can just go. Whereas in Swiss, you have to have the results of every round to pair the next round, because it's based on, everyone's still playing and everyone has the results of the previous round. But with that tournament, it was they had some issues with their website early on, but after that, it ran very, very smoothly.
Yeah, so it can be done. Like it can be done, and I think though one issue I had with that one is that you had to suddenly use more decks in the final.
Oh, that was a total mess. Like I made this, I like had to build a Hunter deck the morning of the tournament. I had to level Hunter to 10 to get Kill Command, and do the Hunter class challenge to get Web Spinner because I just needed a third deck. I hadn't played more than 2 decks at that point. Yeah. And then I made the top 4, and they were like, actually, now you need 5 decks. I was like, what in the world? I need 5.
Like what?
It was hard to make a third deck, and now I need 2 more. But I definitely like to see different formats used in Hearthstone. I actually really like the ESL format that they use. I think that there possibly could be better formats. I actually have a mostly written article for my site about that very subject. But yeah, that sort of thing, where you have like you go from you're playing one sort of game because you literally it was just a different format in the top 4. You went from playing blind pick best of 3 basically to best of 5, all your opponent's classes, you ban a class. It's just a totally different tournament.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of changing things around so drastically towards the end. But that tournament did prove that an open tournament can be done online.
Yeah,
it's possible.
Yeah,
doesn't need to be a mess.
I mean, format is a big thing. I played in my first Grand Prix this year, and that was Swiss format, and I can't imagine so many people showed up that I don't know what the final numbers were. But
what tournament was that?
It was a Grand Prix Orlando. It was the limited one.
Orlando. Okay, I didn't go to that one. I think I was in Hawaii already. So
you were there in spirit.
I live a very rough life.
Yeah, it sounds like. Oh man.
Hawaii. Well, your play mats were all over the place, so you were there in spirit, Brian.
You were lounging all over.
Those are great.
So yeah, it's just this is a little bit of a black mark, and rightfully people are furious. People, and I think in the end, it's like if you feel like you deserve your $5 back, you should go try to get your $5 back, because I hope that these people don't just like make off like bandits with a bunch of people's money. That would really suck. Yeah. And I hope somebody won. I don't even know. How many
people played in the tournament. They were saying that they got so many more people than they expected, and I know that challenge brackets are limited to 256 players.
Yeah, so they must have had to use multiple brackets.
Yeah, I know they used multiple brackets. Like, did they not anticipate that advertising on the BattleNet launcher,
exactly,
that has millions of players, would have more than 256 people interested?
Yeah, so 20 million people play this game. The last time we heard that number, and they all used the launcher to get into that game. Yeah, so guess what? 20 million people may have seen this. Yeah.
Yep.
Bad planning, and whoever was involved in that, just know you pissed a lot of people off, and hopefully the right people are involved in this kind of stuff.
I think they know. I'm pretty sure they're aware that they messed up.
TeamSpeak, kicked everybody
it's not
off.
Like anyone's talking about it on Reddit or anything. How could they possibly see any sort of feedback?
Exactly. Oh, jeez.
Sorry for the players. I hope this doesn't. I just hope that some people are turned off from future open tournaments. I want that to be a thriving scene.
That was. I'm glad you brought that up, Dills, because multiple tweets we got and a couple of the emails we got. This were a lot of these players' first foray into competitive Hearthstone. They're like, is this what it's always like? And I just want you all to know, no, this is not what it's like. This is not at all what it's supposed to be like. Mm-hmm. So please don't let this kind of tarnish it for you.
I'm looking forward to your article, Brian, on formats, because we've talked about it a lot on this show, that we think that there's a lot of room for different types of formats, and
for sure,
still haven't really seen a good single. Actually, the tournament the one tournament I did really well in was a single deck format, but you had unlimited sideboarding essentially.
Sure.
So I mean, I liked single deck. I liked going in and trying to win a bunch of times with my deck. However, though, that didn't quite work because somebody played a handlock and I just put in 2 big game hunters and just beat the crap out of them. So I mean, there's got to be limits in there as well, but. I'm really hoping that we see a lot of really cool stuff. I think ESL is getting closer to some really, really nice formatting. So
for sure,
looking forward to that.
Well, awesome. And again, thanks to all of our listeners for sending in those emails. That'll do it for this week's episode of The Angry Chicken. As always, want to thank everyone who's subscribing over on patreon.com/TAC. This week I want to make sure and thank the following patrons. So big thanks to Ben, Adam M, Gregory F, Levy, and Nat C. Thank you guys very much for supporting the show. We really appreciate it. And also, if you're listening on iTunes and you dropped us a review, thank you guys very much. Thanks this week to Time Worm and DK. So thank you guys very much for supporting the show. We really appreciate it. I want to make a quick mention. I am putting together my first Fireside gathering for Orlando. It's this coming January. You can go to meetup.com/FloridaFireside RSVP and for more information on the venue. As always, we are produced by amove.tv, and we can be found over at the Frog Pants Studios at frogpants.com. All of our past live shows and other videos can be found on youtube.com/StarcastShow. Our t-shirt is on /loot.com. Follow us on Twitter at TAC Podcast. Catch us live every Monday night right here on twitch.tv/AMoveTV. And big thanks to Brian Griffith for our intro music. You can see his work over at briangriffithmusic.com. Brian, you're the guest today, so you get to go first. Where can folks find you when you're not guesting on the show, which is probably a very rare occurrence?
I'm on both Twitter and Twitch as BM Kibler. My website, which we mentioned earlier in the show, is BMK Gaming. I write strategy and game design, philosophy type articles there. If you are a fan of digital collectible games like Hearthstone, I suggest you check out SoulForge, which is my company's game. It's also free to play, available on PC, iPad, and Android tablets and phones. Yeah, all of that is sweet stuff you should check out.
Awesome. And thank you again for coming on. We really appreciated it.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure.
And Dills, where can folks find you when you're not being the angriest of chickens?
You can find me Friday mornings doing The Instance, the World of Warcraft podcast. You don't have to, with Scott Johnson, Terpster, and Patrick from France. We're not going to be doing a show this week because it's Christmas. So why would you want to listen to a podcast about World of Warcraft? Hang out with your family, people. Go out, talk to people. Better. Torchcast podcast about the San Francisco Giants. Not a lot going on there. We're just re-signing our own dudes again. Everyone else seems to be getting awesome free agents, so that kind of sucks. So we'll talk about that. And Mediocre Golf Association. If you like golf and you suck at it, join the Mediocre Golf Association, mgatour.com. We're in our off-season. We'll probably be having some off-season events and stuff in March of next year. You join a chapter, get it going. So check it out there. Oh, and then I will be streaming when I get back from Seattle. I'll be in Seattle for Christmas, and then I'll get back on Friday, and I think I have a week off of work. So that sounds like a lot of Hearthstone streaming to me. So check me out, twitch.tv/WillyDillsSF.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to the Christmas break, man. Much gaming that needs to be done.
Much.
If you want to hear more from my mouth, you can find me on Twitter at GarrettArt. My graphic design work can be found at nomoonart.com. I promise I'm going to update it. Got a new game coming out next year that I can finally show, so that's going to be going up there soon. Check out Into the Nexus, the Heroes of the Storm podcast that I do with Kyle Ferguson. And also, real quick, my first article of many more to come is up over on hearthhead.com. I talked about how just minion friendly and awesome.
Wait, what? You're writing over there now too?
Yeah, I'm right. I'm encroaching on your turf, Dills. I'm writing over on Hearthstone as well.
I need more people on my turf, man.
My first article is all about how just minion-friendly Hearthstone has become in the wake of GVG. I love how minion-heavy all the decks have become, and I wanted to talk about that kind of shift in the meta. So
this looks great. I'm going to read this right now. Awesome.
All right, well, go check that out.
My article just went up on IGN today, too.
Whoa! Going over to IGN, too.
Yeah, check that out, too.
Dills, do you have a new article on Hearthhead you want to promote before we leave so we can complete the circle?
No, but there will be one this week.
Awesome.
You ruined the hat trick. Jeez. Well, you have
sorry. I'm so sorry. But I will be talking about Paladin because it's really good.
Delightful. I would like to talk to you about this since that's all I've been playing lately.
Okay.
And as always, want to thank our sponsors, DogHouseSystems.com. The code to use is TAC, and when you use that code, you will get double memory on your next Doghouse Systems gaming rig, and you will directly support the show in the process. We thank them for their support. We thank you all for listening. One more big thanks to Brian Kibler for joining us today. Go check out bmkgaming.com, and we will see you all. Actually, we're not sure if we'll be back next week because of New Year's and all that jazz, but we'll figure it out. We'll let you know on Twitter, but we'll see you all soon, and until then, job's done.
Job's done. Oh, yeah, you're supposed to say job's done now.
Oh, job's done.
Yes!